That's
That's
nice. Yeah,
that's not that's nice.
that's nice.
Or this one,
The first one I thought was better. The first one.
or that was nice.
Yeah, I got one of those two right here, but I haven't used
Yeah,
it.
but you're not using it.
I'm using it for my Instagram. I'm just playing.
Mashallah, my joint is all set up now, man. I mean,
Yeah,
they also sent me a speaker for sound as well,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I haven't plugged it in yet because all of the calls I've done, I haven't received any complaints about the sound.
No, the sound's good. Mashallah. They sent me a microphone too, like this,
Yeah, yeah.
something like that. And alhamdulillah, I've just been using this. But honestly, that light made a big difference. I've been shying away from doing this, but maybe I should do it at some point. But really, 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 I'm not the main attraction here. I'm just you know.
No, 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 no. Mashallah, you are the main attraction. You say the light made a difference.
Yeah, it looks good. Looks good. Mashallah.
Alhamdulillah.
I-
So we're probably gonna have to stop pray Maghrib in a second and probably start right after Maghrib, I'm guessing.
yes, exactly. So we'll probably Maghrib is Chicago time. It's at let's see, at 7:32. So at 7:30, I'll probably make a quick announcement to have people know that we'll be starting right after the performance of Maghrib. So inshallah, I'll let them know like 7:37, something like that. 7:40. We'll get started.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
There's some people on right now. I don't know. They're probably watching us.
Oh,
MashaAllah.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
Salam alaikum. Kevin, I still gotta call you. If you're on, I'm calling you soon, akhi. Soon. I promise.
Yeah, Kevin's a good brother, man. I met him in the Bay. That was beautiful. And his sister lives in Chicago as well.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Man, one of my best friends, his younger sister accepted Islam Sunday.
Oh, mashallah. How did they do it? Did they do it like virtually or was it what?
Yeah, yeah. It was like virtually. My good friend is in Boston. Now of that, this is a brother we grew up together. Um, went to high school together. Now he's Muslim. His younger brother is Muslim, and his younger sister is Muslim. Alhamdulillah.
Okay. Did he enter Islam after you?
Yeah. Akhi, man, it's amazing how much zeal and ardor I had, man, early on, man. I accepted Islam, and it was like, you know, I was giving everybody dawah.
Yeah.
Everybody, I was giving them dawah. Anybody I encountered at the bus stop, on the street, in the restaurant. Some of that might not have been the most judicious.
but
Some of
but
that,
but it was sincere. But it was
inshallah,
sincere.
wallahu ta'ala
Yeah.
a'lam. Some of that might not have been the most judicious da'wah, but I was certainly passionate about talking about Islam with people. Alhamdulillah.
Subhanallah. We're covering fantasizing, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Fantasizing. That's what we're.
Subhanallah. Look, man, get your mind in the right place and out of the wrong place, man.
I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with that. See? Huh?
Although it's
My
interesting
fantasies
because
are usually my fantasies usually end up with getting drafted to the NBA. You
oh
know,
yeah, that's definitely haram. but you to think about getting drafted, oh, that's definitely a waste of time. Actually, that's diya al undoubtedly. For you to think about playing well in a regular men's league is diya al
Ah,
So
come
yeah,
on,
no,
Cindy, get out of here.
no. You know, man, I think when we're together, sometimes I take little jabs at you about basketball, but I actually admire your game a lot. You play. I like the way you play the game. Wallahi, I like the way you play the game.
Can you repeat that when there's 150 people on, please? Can you?
No, never, never.
I got witnesses right here. I got Hadia, Huma, Janine, Whitney. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
I never said. I never. You know what? That's the effect of a COVID-19 quarantine. I just spouted this effusion that just came out of nowhere, but I really don't like the way you play. No, I really, honestly, I like the way you play the game. Wallahi.
I take that as a big honor. Big honor.
Allah. No, you play the game the right way. MashaAllah. I want to say wa alaikum salam to the Shaws. Shout out to my man, Malik. I just hope that he's well. I've been praying for him, praying for his family, praying for him especially. I actually was I actually intended on calling the brother yesterday, and I didn't get around to it. So maybe tonight or tomorrow, inshallah. Got to reach out to my man Malik. Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
So it is inshallah 7:32, 31 here. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We ask God to send peace and blessings upon his beloved Prophet Muhammad and companions. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is Purification of the Heart with Ustad Ubaydullah Evans. Alhamdulillah, he needs no introduction. You guys know who he is. And if you know who he is, inshallah, you'll know who he is, inshallah. Today we'll be covering from this beautiful book the chapter of fantasization or fantasizing, which is on page 51 of the book of Purification of the Heart. Before we get into it, we will be taking about not even a 10-minute break, about an 8-minute break to perform the sunset prayer, the Maghrib prayer in Chicago, because it's coming in about a few minutes if it hasn't come in already. And we'll be reconvening collectively together at 7:40 p.m. Central Time. That's 5:40 p.m. Pacific, and that is 8:40 p.m. Eastern. Inshallah. Jazakallahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. What about the mountain? What about the mountain zone? No viewers from the. You left out the mountain time zone.
I just didn't want to confuse myself, to be honest with you. That was hard enough as it is.
La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Inshallah, we'll be back after Maghrib, inshallah.
وذكور جيران بذي سلمي مزجت دمعا جرى من مقلة بدمي أم هبت الريح من تلقاء كاظمة وأغمز البرق في ظلماء من إذمي مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم يا ربي صل على محمد وعلى سادتنا آله وصحبه الكرام فما لعينيك إن قلت ففهمتا وما لقلبك إن قلت استفيق يا همي يحسب السب أن الهب منكتم ما بين منسجم منه ومضطرب مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم يا ربي صل على محمد وعلى سادتنا آله وصحبه الكرام لولا الهوى لم طريق دمعا على طاللي ولا أرق لذكر الباني والعالمي ولا أعرضك ثوبي عبرد وضنا ذكر الخيام وذكر ساكن الخيام مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم يا ربي صل على محمد وعلى سادتنا آله وصحبه الكرام فكيف تنكره بل بعدما شهدت به عليك عدول الدمع والسقم وأثبت الوجد خاتي عبرتي ودنا مثل البهار على خديك والعالم مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم يا ربي صل على محمد وعلى سادتنا آله وصحبه الكرام يا لئيمي في الهوى العذري مديرة مني إليك ولو أنصفت لم تلمي عادتك حالي لا سري في مستتر عن المشاة ولا داعي بمنهزم مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم يا ربي صل على محمد وعلى سادتنا آله والصحب وصحبه الكرام مهدت للنصح لكن لا
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most gracious and most merciful. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And we send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad and his family and community, companions and community. Welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for making this happen. Thank you all for joining us on a Tuesday evening. Alhamdulillah, we'll be covering from the book Purification of the Heart, translated by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. This is a great book. If you don't have it, try to get it. I know it's easy to get on Amazon or anywhere else, that Mecca books and different places. Inshallah, we'll be covering the chapter that is on page 51, which is a chapter called Fantasizing. Fantasizing. That's the chapter on page 51 of the book. We'll be covering this with Ustad Ubaydullah Evans, and he is coming on very shortly. Right now we broke because Central Time in Chicago is right now Maghrib time. It's the sunset prayer, and so we're a little bit delayed just so we can get the prayer in, get the blessings of the prayer, get the blessings of getting a prayer on time, and especially in these last few days before Ramadan is upon us. So, Alhamdulillah, Ustad Ubaydullah Evans is here, and we are good to go. Sidi, I just told them the chapter and told them the book and told them we'll be getting started. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we're all yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم. It is a great honor and a great privilege to be with you as always. I really want to thank everyone that has demonstrated a consistent dedication to attending this session. I am quite resolute in my belief that these sessions are given their spiritual momentum, if there is such a thing, not by the instructor, but by the people who attend these kinds of majalis, these kinds of sessions. And we make sessions like this a part of our regular, regime spiritually. And even though it's a very short amount of time that we're spending, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes the benefit and the reward of this time immense. I'm reminded of the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, خَيْرُ الْأُمُورِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ, that the best deeds in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's regard are those that are performed with the most consistency, even if they're small. So that even this tuning in to this class once a week for an hour and maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes, it's a small thing, but inshallah, at a time like this, inshallah, with consistency, it can be something of great benefit for us, inshallah. We're still going over the didactic poem of Imam Maulud, Matarat al-Qulub, or Purification of the Hearts. And we've arrived at the chapter Fantasizing, right? And fantasizing is one of those words that I'm more accustomed to hearing it and using it in the gerund, right? Ending in ing than in the adjective. Like when you said fantasization, I was like, Ali, that sounds much too complex. Tonight, we're not talking about fantasization. We're just talking about fantasizing. The other thing about the term fantasizing is that when people use it now, it almost singularly connotes a romantic meaning or context. People think fantasizing, they think something romantic, they think something sexual. But in the way that the Imam is deploying the term, fantasizing is thinking about anything, even if one is not deriving pleasure from this kind of thinking about anything that is literally not one's business. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Min husni Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni." From the beauty of a person's Islam is that they leave things that don't concern them. Leaving things that are not your immediate concern. Turning away from things that are not germane to your situation. Turning away from things that are not relevant to oneself. So I want you to think about that kind of broader context of fantasizing as we read the abyat or read the verses of the poem. And in between two huge chapters, you have two chapters that take up about 6 or 7 verses between blameworthy modesty, and after this is ostentation. You have this small, just 2 lines dedicated to fantasizing. But I think in our context, a malady of the heart like fantasizing acquires some additional significance, and we should explore that, inshallah. So he begins, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The heart's engagement in matters that do not concern it is only forbidden when it pertains to the prohibited, such as fantasizing about the beautiful qualities of a woman or a man that one is not married to, or dwelling, or on the faults of Muslims, even in their absence. Very short lines, right? Now, he says the heart's engagement with anything that does not concern it is forbidden. Now we have to look at what when we say min husni Islam al-mar'i min husni Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. From the beauty of a person's Islam is turning away from those things that don't concern oneself. What should you be concerned with? What should you be preoccupied with? What should you be thinking about? What should you be reflecting upon? What should you be contemplating? The only thing that we should be thinking about, the only thing we should be preoccupied by are things that bring us benefit in the akhirah or things that bring us benefit in the dunya. It's very simple. And I don't want to put too sharp a point on that, right? We're not austere in that there's not a time for humor, not a time for levity, not a time for enjoyment. Of course, those are things that actually bring us benefit in the dunya, right? Being able to laugh, being able to engage in good storytelling with friends and brothers and associates and sisters. These are things that bring us benefit, right? The Prophet ﷺ said in another hadith similar to the hadith we quoted that all of the kalam, all of the speech of the child of Adam, the son or daughter of Adam, is against him or her, except for the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And the exhortation toward taqwa, right? Now, of course, we can't put too sharp a point on that. And this is one of the, mashallah, this is why we have to study hadith. Now, a person looks at a hadith like that, and maybe they conclude to talk about anything other than Islam is expressly forbidden by the Prophet ﷺ. But then the Prophet talked about muda'aba, kind of the light-hearted engagement that one might have with their spouse or with relatives or friends, or these are all things that are permissible. These are things in which the Prophet ﷺ engaged himself. So that's not what we're talking about. We're not mentioning fantasizing and saying if it does not concern benefit in the dunya in a strictly religious sense or benefit in the akhirah in a strictly religious sense, we are forbidden from even thinking about it. No, our religion, mashallah, is more balanced than that. Ali, it seems like you want to say something. Bismillah.
It was amazing because you remind me of when the companions say that when we spoke about the world, the Prophet ﷺ used to speak to us about the world. And then when we spoke about the afterlife, the Prophet ﷺ spoke to us about the afterlife. So he just kept engaging with them in all phases, in all forms.
MashaAllah, there's a hadith in the Shama'il of Imam al-Tirmidhi. كان يتعجب بما نتعجب. That the Prophet ﷺ used to be amazed by what amazed us. So I don't want anyone to conclude that, to talk about world affairs or to talk about culture or to talk about politics or to talk about sport, things like this are explicit. But no, this is not. And this is why in the second line, he says, it's only forbidden when it pertains to the prohibited. And here we see something very subtle about this book. Teaching this book, this is my second time teaching this book. I've read this book with teachers, mashallah. Shout out to Sheikh Muhammad Imam on 63rd Street, mashallah. Imam Maulu's intent in writing this book is not simply to point out what the diseases of the heart are, but you see that he's also pointing out what the diseases of the heart aren't, what they are not. So he's saying, look, if you're thinking about something forbidden, then and only then is this a disease of the heart. If you're thinking about something that is not forbidden, so one is maybe thinking about, I don't know, going on vacation, or these days, just thinking about getting out of the house, right? Thinking about what it would be like not to have your basement look like it rained Legos. If I turn my camera very quickly, you see that. You see that. You see that. To not look like, he's saying that, it's only forbidden when you are fantasizing about something forbidden, right? And then he mentions two examples. The first he mentions kind of, takes us right to how we typically deploy the term fantasizing. Thinking about a romantic involvement or even thinking about a deep emotional engagement with someone that one is not committed to in marriage, a man or a woman. And it's worth mentioning that in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La taqrabu zina. Don't come close to illicit intercourse. Don't approach illicit intercourse. And people that have struggled with that in the past will tell you that often that kind of action begins with fantasizing. It begins with the failure to monitor bad thoughts. There's a saying in English, be careful to monitor your thoughts because your thoughts become your habits and you are your habits. So if one is, thinking about some celebrity, and this is very common in our time, that one is thinking about some celebrity, that one spends day and night thinking about this celebrity, thinking about him and thinking about, what it would be like to be in his presence or what it would be like to be in her presence. This can only have a deleterious effect on one's soul, oneself. This is not good. This is not good. If one is involved in a relationship that is licit and lawful and wholesome and pure, and one still engages in this intense fantasizing about someone else, it can lead to what? A lack of appreciation for the relationship that you have been blessed with. I was asking one of my teachers for marital advice, and after he told me, be nice, mashallah, the best advice that I have ever received and that I still struggle to put into practice and implement on a regular basis, be nice. You want marital advice? Be nice. But beside that, he said, a Rabbani person, a person of the Lord, right? A Rabbani person never fails to appreciate their spouse because they appreciate that this is the person through whom half of my deen was, realized, fulfilled. This was the person through whom my loneliness was dashed. My loneliness I was relieved of my loneliness. And they don't forget that. But if a person spends prolonged periods of time fantasizing about someone else, and that fantasy is usually about someone unattainable, right? It leads to a lack of appreciation for what you have, for what you've been given, right? So be careful not to engage in this and it's subtle. It can sneak up on you, especially in the midst of the celebrity culture that we have. Imam Malik is recorded to have been sitting with some of his students, and he asked them, "Is there anyone worse than someone who gives up the akhirah, right, which is eternal, for the delights of the dunya, which of course are only temporary, are only temporal?" And all of his students, they responded in unison, no, there is no one worse than that. And Imam Malik said, yes, there is. Someone who gives up the akhirah, which is eternal, for someone else's dunya, not even their own dunya. They're giving up time, and time is a precious commodity. Time is a finite resource. They're giving up their precious time, giving up their mental space, giving up their emotional attachment for things in the dunya that they can't even attain. And I can't tell you personally how many conversations I engaged in as a young man, and perhaps even as a mature man, unfortunately, talking about the things of the dunya that were given to someone else, talking about someone else's house, talking about someone else's cars, talking about someone else's art, meaning art that they collect, talking about someone else's vacations. You know, this is a kind of fantasizing that can lead to ingratitude, right? It's much better to fill that time with appreciation, with shukr, with gratefulness for what you have, as opposed to filling it with fantasy concerning what someone else has. And reality television, and I don't want to, everybody has their guilty pleasures. Everybody has their guilty pleasures. I love sports, right? And I love documentary film. I'm, you know, I've watched all kinds of documentaries, man. If it's a documentary, I'll probably watch it, right? So you're probably thinking, did you see Tiger King? I did, unfortunately. Right.
I was thinking, but I didn't watch it. Yeah, I did
You know,
not watch. But I
unfortunately,
was like,
man.
did he watch Tiger King?
Unfortunately, Habib, unfortunately, I have, you know, you know, I have a weakness for documentaries. So I don't want to sit here. The only reason I'm mentioning that is not to make mujahara bil dhunub. It's not to openly publicize or highlight my struggles. It's simply to say it would be disingenuous of me to sit here and pretend like I don't engage in any, I don't watch any frivolous entertainment, right? Um, that would be false. And there's a part of me that just would not feel comfortable acting as if, oh, I don't. That's all hurrah. That's all balderdash. That's all. That's abath. That's just nonsense. No, I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable acting as if I don't watch. I have my little documentaries and I like my sports and things of that nature. But I do think All of that being said, there is something particularly worrisome about reality TV because it's being filmed as though it's reality, but it's not reality, right? You have, scripted conflicts. No one is working, right? Work appears to be attending social events, going to gatherings, um, um, uh, and some people look at these programs and they begin to compare their own lives with these programs. Wow, things seem so much easier in reality TV world. And that kind of lifestyle becomes a fantasy of sorts, right? That one would aspire to live in this meaningless way. One would aspire to live in this purposeless way. And we have to be very, very careful about that, right? The next aspect of fantasizing that he mentions is a dwelling. Again, this is talking about the dunya, right? Talking about the dunya. That, mashallah, in some madhahib, they say that thinking, right, or talking excessively. I actually heard this from a Hanafi scholar that talking excessively about something of the dunya that one does not intend to acquire is hura. It's a waste of time. That's boulder dash. So if one is talking about mega mansions and you're not actually in the market for that kind of home, right? You're just talking about it and talking about it and talking about it and pouring over every architectural detail, mega mansions, mega mansions, mega mansions, mega mansions. And you have no intent to shop for a home like that, to tour a home like that. It is just something you're preoccupying yourself with. That is disliked in some cases, and in some cases haram. The same is true of cars, right? You're just sitting and just pouring over every single detail, but you have no intention on purchasing a car like that. You have no intention on actually acquiring this object, this item, this commodity. You're just thinking about it and talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. Some people would say this is an unhealthy engagement with some unattainable aspect of the dunya. Now, there was just a question. Someone said, what's the difference between aspiration and fantasizing? I would say that aspiration is accompanied by some plan to obtain what it is you aspire to obtain. That's the difference. Fantasizing is never accompanied by a plan. It never goes beyond mere uh, uh, um, ideation. See, fantasizing never goes beyond ideation. You're just thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. Aspiration is usually accompanied by some kind of أخذ الأسباب وأخذ الوسائل, you know, taking the means necessary to acquire the thing you aspire to acquire. We see the shades of this difference in meaning between the Arabic terms tamanni and the raja, right? Tamanni is like tamanniyat are like vain hopes, empty hopes, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about some members of the Jewish community and he uses yataman, right? They hope to live forever or they hope to be given a lifespan of 1,000 years. But that's just a vain hope. That's tamanni. It's a vain hope. Raja is hope that is accompanied by action, right? Arju, I'm hoping, but it's not suspended at the level of hope. It's hope accompanied by practical steps that are taken to obtain the thing that I'm thinking about. Does that answer the question? Because I saw the question flash on my screen. MashaAllah. Are there any other questions before we move on?
If
Mm.
you want to get into questions, CD, there was then a few of them.
Mhm.
One of them says, this is by Iman bin Dawi.
Mhm.
Seems from this description that most social media falls within the category of quote unquote fantasy. We are
Mhm.
encouraged to spend hours of our day um, scrolling through Instagram, quasi fantasizing about lives that aren't ours, sending comments that will never be read, liking pictures of people who will never meet, and things we will never acquire. Can you talk about the danger of this question mark? You can answer that
Sure.
now or answer it later if you like.
Well, I'll take a few now, and then we'll continue, inshallah. I think it's a very good observation. MashaAllah, man. Salam to Iman. Um, I don't want to put, I feel because I am not on social media, I probably am not the best person to talk about all of the positive ways that those media can be used. Um, I would feel it a little imbalanced for me to talk about social media being bad and but if it's being used in the way that she suggests, this would fall into the category of fantasizing, and it would be something that does not concern us. Like it really does. It should not concern me. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah in his Madarij al-Salikin, he said that like inordinate preoccupation with what someone else has been given in the dunya, whether madhan or dhamman, whether you're praising it excessively or you're disparaging it excessively, dalal is misguidance, right? But he says inordinate preoccupation, not just that, someone says, oh, so and so has this or so and so has that. You say, mashallah, alhamdulillah, right? Tubli wa yukhlif Allah ta'ala. May Allah bless you in your use of that thing. And then when you finish using it, may Allah replace it with something better, right? So, right, to acknowledge that someone has been given something good, or that there is some fortuitous opportunity that has come the person's way. This is not bad, but to be like thinking about it and like fantasizing about it, to be obsessed with what someone else has, whether you are obsessively uh, lusting after what they have or obsessively disparaging what they have as wasteful, as unnecessary, as unscrupulous, as he said, it's dolal, it's a type of misguidance. So I agree. If, like Iman said, we are looking at the social media feeds of people that we follow, and it just leads to us having this obsessive relationship with their lives, almost as if we're vicariously living through their experiences. This could be problematic. This kind of fantasizing, I mean, to be fair, can even occur on a spiritual level. Man, I remember when I was in Yemen, subhanAllah, we would sit up after Isha telling stories, everybody telling a better story than the next person about their sheikh, about the different karamat, right? The different miracles, right? Khawarikul adat, the different, you know, uh, 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 um, unnatural occurrences, right? That, people that they were associated with had either experienced or were, apparently the direct cause of. So one person will say, my sheikh was walking and a lion broke out of the zoo and everybody got scared. And my sheikh grabbed the lion by his ear and walked him back into the cage. So, mashallah. Then someone else would say, oh, that's not that. Once my sheikh was talking to me and my best friend and my other best friend, and we were all in 3 different places. So that's enough. Once I was leaving the masjid after Isha, I looked up, I saw my sheikh levitating over the top of the dome of the masjid, right? And as we were doing this, one of the teachers came out and said, stop spending your time telling so many stories and let your stories tell you. By which he meant, if you really aspired, aspiration, mashallah, to Asada's point, fantasizing and aspiring, if you really aspire to those kinds of spiritual states that you apparently admire in the people you're talking about, you would be asleep so that you could wake up for Qiyam al-Layl. You would be asleep so that you could wake up and recite from the Quran. But instead, you guys will spend 3 to 4 hours telling stories, fall asleep, and then barely wake up to pray Fajr in the dorm room right before Shuruq. And then do it again the next night, right before daybreak, and then do it again the next night. Right? Well, right before sunrise, and do it again the next night. Right? So if we're engaged in talking about someone else and it's a legitimate source of inspiration, it will be accompanied by action, right? I'm talking about her story so that I can emulate her. I'm talking about his story so that I can emulate him. If I'm just fantasizing, right? Again, tamanni, I'm talking about her story merely for entertainment. I'm talking about his story merely for amusement. There's a difference. There's a difference, right? So Imam makes a very good point. So I guess it boils down to the spirit in which we're engaging social media. If we're doing it just to stay in touch with people, sharing some of their experiences, comment, oh, that's really cool. But if we're developing this almost obsessive relationship with the lives of other people, this could be a kind of fantasizing. Um, Another thing that he mentions is fantasizing, right? And you wouldn't think about this as like fantasizing, but thinking, contemplating, talking about the faults of other Muslims, right? This is a big thing in our community, man. People getting together and talking about all of the misguided people. There's a hadith of the Prophet والسلام, that mentions, men qala ma ahlaka nas wa ahlakuhum. Whoever says, oh, the people are so ruined, he's the most ruinous one of them all, right? Be very careful of that. Be very, sometimes I think many of us that are well-meaning, sometimes we sit and we think about the moral decay of the Muslim community, just how bad things are, right? Sometimes we're talking about this with other people. Sometimes we're merely thinking about this. Our community is falling so short of our, mission and moral imperative, and everybody is so. This can result in a very debilitating kind of cynicism. Be very wary of that. This is something I've seen. I've seen people begin with thinking about how messed up Muslims are and end in apostasy. Be very careful about that. When the Prophet ﷺ was walking with Safiya radiallahu anha, and he rushed to those two men and he said, I just want you to know, this is my wife, Safiya, right? And they said, Ya Rasulullah, we would never think anything untoward about you. And he said, I'm just telling you because the shaitan yajri fikum majra dam. The shaitan flows in each of you like blood. One of the most interesting things about this hadith is that all of the commentaries that I've read, And everybody that I've learned this hadith from, they talk about this hadith as number one, demonstrating the value of husn al-dhan, right? Demonstrating the value of having a good opinion of other people. But they tend to talk also about the value of protecting one's reputation. Nobody ever talks about that maybe the Prophet ﷺ was also protecting their iman. He was also protecting their faith. Because people that now, because I mean, of course, if they think that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is the uswa, is the qudwa, is less than a man of complete integrity, of course, this would destroy their faith, right? Everyone else to a lesser degree. If you sit thinking about how all of the religious leaders in the Muslim community, they're all closeted, perverted, people of ill will. This is something that could be very dangerous for the person engaging in such thoughts. For the person given to such thinking, this could endanger their faith. So thinking about the faults of other people, this is not something that you should refrain from just to protect them. This is something that you should refrain from in order to protect yourself. There's an authentic hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that there is a special tree in paradise that will provide shade for people that are so preoccupied with their own uyub, with their own faults, that they cannot. Hold on, Ali. I have to get some water, man.
Hold on.
Bismillah. Oh man, I don't know if you call those technical difficulties, gastrointestinal difficulties, or
No,
has
we miss the opportunity of having the teachers and then just being able to bring them like some water,
no, mashallah.
some
But
food,
no, man, I had some
that stuff, mashallah.
mashallah, man. My wife, she served some chocolate covered almonds after dinner. You know how like with almonds, like sometimes like the skin of the almond can get lodged in there. So forgive me for that. But
You beat me to dinner tonight. You beat me to dinner. I'm going to dinner after this.
inshallah khair. Inshallah khair. Hani'a mari'a, inshallah. But bon appetit. Um, uh, Interestingly enough, man, thinking about the faults of other people, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that there's a special tree in paradise which provides shade for people that are so preoccupied with their own faults that they can scarcely think about the faults of other people. And we forget that really we're supposed to be a people of sitr, right? Of satrul uyub, covering the faults of other people, trying to put the best construction on what we see from other people, not people that are given to just this almost scurrilous thinking about who made what mistake and how they made the mistake. And this is just simply not who we are. This is simply not a part of the character of a Muslim. Hold on one second. What? With what? Oh. You're watching the stairs. Oh, sorry. My wife actually just brought me some water. But Jazakillah khair. But this is simply, not, who we are, right? People just thinking about, the faults of other people. I'm sure I said this a couple of weeks ago, but it said كَفَى بِرَجُلٍ ضَلَالًا. It's enough for a person of misguidance to hear something from the Quran or from the Sunnah and to think about someone else. That you would hear something about patience and think, I wonder if Brother Abdullah knows this. That you would hear something about generosity and think, I wonder if Sister Zainab knows this. You would hear something about gentleness, rifq, and think, I wonder if Zayd knows this. That you would hear something about forbearance, about hilm, and think, I wonder if Amr knows this, right? That everything you hear, everything, you should always be the first person to whom the measuring stick is applied. Always, always,
See,
right?
Ubayd, I have a quick question.
Yes.
We're talking a lot about thought here and fantasizing and thought.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is it a sin to have a certain thought? So we're talking about maybe Sister Zainab didn't, maybe she's not as generous as we want her to be, like you mentioned, right? So when we
Mm-hmm.
heard that in the Quran, we thought, well, I wonder if she knew that statement or not, right? So that's a little
Mm-hmm.
thought about who we
Sure,
think Sister Zainab is or isn't.
sure,
Okay?
sure, sure.
Is there sin there?
No, actually, you know, um, he's talking here about diseases, right? Amrad, right? Diseases of the heart. Uh, Not the same thing as sin, right? To have a bad thought, is not sinful. I think Imam Maulud is exploring fantasizing as something that is impeding our spiritual progress. It's something that impedes spiritual growth because it's taking up mental space that could be dedicated to much more fruitful activity. You understand? But it's not sin. To think something bad about someone that you never utter, and perhaps that you even attempt to combat, or a thought that you attempt to remove from your mind. No, this isn't a sin. But if one is given to habitually thinking about these things, that can actually lead to something that manifests itself in the form of sin.
Right. Your thoughts become your action eventually. That's what you're saying.
Right, exactly. Your thoughts will eventually become your actions, right? But it's not to for something to kind of yakhtur bibal. We say in Arabic, a khatira. It's like, it's almost like um, um, a very quick, it's a khatira. It's khatara bibalik. Yani it's something that it passed your mind very quickly. Right. Insinuation, not an insinuation. Um, my words fail me. Um, but kind of a quick, fleeting idea is not a sin. But if one is, experiencing negative or quick, fleeting thoughts of inappropriate fantasy, one should, at the very least, recognize those, try to eliminate those, so that the action does not become habitual. You know what I'm saying? And then in the commentary on these verses, Sheikh Hamza mentioned, in addition to Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, who wrote a very brief commentary to each chapter, um, thinking about that, thinking about the divine essence, thinking about the divine essence of God. This can also be, or this is, a kind of contemplation we should avoid. But instead, we should think about the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should deepen our contemplation on the things that God has said about himself, because those are the things which are verifiable. The things that, and we know, part of our not part of our theology is acknowledging that there are things about God that of course, transcend language, right? Transcend human experience. Things that are too great to be grasped by the finite mind. Of course, we acknowledge those things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Laysa kamithlihi shay. There is nothing like unto him. But if one is given to obsessively thinking about those matters, right? This can lead to very negative, very deleterious effects on one's faith. That can have a very negative impact on one's faith, right? There are some things, I think the purpose of them, the purpose of thinking about them, the purpose of reflecting upon them is to recognize the limits of the finite mind, right? One anthropologist whose name I cannot recall said, the difference between the faith of the people of old and some of the unfaith that is becoming more popular in our time is not science or empiricism. It's an appreciation for mystery. That the ancients, before kind of the technical explosion that happened vis-a-vis the scientific revolution, they had much more of an appreciation for mystery, just as an orientation, that something that I cannot understand or something that I cannot explain does not need to be dismissed as meaningless, right? What is the saying in Arabic? Al-ilm bil-adam laysa al-ilm bil-ma'doom, right? Knowledge of that something is unknown is not knowledge of the thing that is unknown, right? Right? So knowledge that this is something that is beyond my comprehension is not the knowledge of the thing itself. It's not saying, okay, the only thing this is beyond my comprehension. No. It's beyond my comprehension. That does not mean that it doesn't have a reality. It just means that reality it lies beyond my comprehension. It lies beyond my ability to understand. That of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine essence, right? Meaning literally the stuff of divinity. Wa'iyadu billah. Even to say that is just the limitations of language, right? Thinking about the essence of divinity, what it is made of. This is something that lies beyond comprehension. And excessive and inordinate contemplation about things like this can lead us into great difficulty in our iman. Okay, so it was a short chapter, about fantasizing. He began talking about romantic, fantasizing, but of course he didn't limit his engagement with the topic to romantic fantasizing. He also talked about fantasizing about aspects of dunya, and then thinking about the faults of other people, and then after that we talked about thinking about the divine essence. So, how much? What time is it, Ali?
It is 8:29.
Okay.
So we have quite a few questions if you want to engage in some questions.
Bismillah, I would love to.
Yeah, so let's see. We got one that says, what about fantasy novels? Question mark. Reading reading can occupy a lot of time and mental space, yet uh, it is certainly unattainable and not my business.
Wow.
That's
I don't know that reading fantasy novels is haram. I don't think that reading fantasy novels is haram. In terms of it, taking up too much space in a person's life, This is a personal determination. This is something that,
This is Hiba Mustafa asking, just in case. Hiba Mustafa.
mashallah, yeah, this is something that one has to determine. One has to look at, how they apportion their time, and if they find that, reading, novels occupies so much of my time that I can't even pray, because maybe the novel is that gripping, that engrossing, that I can't even, tear myself away from the book in order to make dhuhr. This could be, an unhealthy engagement, with fantasy reading. Um, in terms of the genre itself, because it's called fantasy, um, hmm, I don't think so. But I don't know. But I don't think so. I don't think so. But I can check and I can see what other people have written. Commonly, I've heard people talk about, magic, figuring very prominently into these storylines. And our um, approach to magic and sorcery should not be that it is something to be amused by, and it's something, it actually can be something quite serious. But then again, in spite of those warnings, I haven't heard anyone say categorically that reading fantasy is haram. But I'm sure there's a multiplicity of opinions out there.
Okay. So there's another question, Sadie, and I knew this was going to come up. I think a few people asked it. It's basically talking about, people having crushes on other people that might be attainable to them, but it's saying word for word in this one by Letty Shaw, thinking about young people with crushes, and then in parentheses on attainable people, is thinking about and hoping to marry them a blameworthy fantasizing. Also, are you punished for your thoughts? No, we answered that second one. So that's where it ends.
Bismillah. Well, it's interesting in the Maliki school, and that, I can speak to that, because my primary training at Azhar was in Maliki law. If a thought passes the mind, right, kind of, we would call it an inadvertent thought, right? There's no sin in that. There's no ithm. There's no, right. It's not, that's not seen as something blameworthy. On the other hand, if it becomes a source of istimta, a source of tamattu, like one is beginning to derive pleasure, right? One is beginning to derive pleasure from thinking about someone to whom they are not married, someone with whom they are not married. This is haram, actually, right? This is haram. And it's not the thought that is haram, it's the intentional derivation of pleasure from the idea, right? And go with that where you want to go with that, right? It does not mean that it has to be accompanied by um, autoeroticism, right? It just means that one is thinking about these things in a way that uh, 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 you know almost is not respecting the boundaries that exist between you and that person, right? This hukum suggests that you don't have a right to think about that person in that way, right? In a way, not in a way like, I wonder if I could marry them. Um, you know, uh, they are, they have a very inspiring, personality, and I am really taken with them. These thoughts might be uncontrollable, but if one begins to actually think about that person in a carnal way, right? Think about that person in an explicitly sexual way. Arabic doesn't have some of the ambiguity that exists in English isn't there in Arabic. So istimta just doesn't mean like, you think about the person you get like happy thoughts, like, oh, what a great person. No, no, you're thinking about the person in an explicitly carnal way. This is haram, actually.
Um, Next question. Selma Khan asked, "In what way can I redirect my thoughts to hold myself accountable, or what can help me?" In parentheses, struggling question mark.
Mm. You know, accountability is tough. You know, I think that um, in our, one of the things I've observed, in a lot of my work is that it's hard to find, and just in my own path, it's hard to find balance with regard to accountability. I tend to encounter people that either have um, um, overblown notions of what they are, or people that have no self-esteem at all, right? And um, accountability is about finding balance. It's about finding balance, right? It's holding oneself accountable should never result in the belief that one has no value, that one is not possessed of any value. Holding oneself accountable actually requires some esteem, because if you don't have any esteem, you won't be able to hold yourself accountable without feeling that you will leave completely demoralized, right? I find that when I am convinced that, there are some things about me that are good, some things about me that are bad, it's much easier to countenance the bad. See, and I think that, people that attempt to advise us, maybe family members, maybe spouses, um, when they tell us about the bad without mentioning the good, it triggers a defensive. You see, it triggers, and I think the same thing is true for when we attempt to hold ourselves accountable. If I just think about my bad, everything that I do wrong, all of the mistakes that I make, all of the problems that I have, I think my knee-jerk response is to reject that realization. Oh, no, no, I'm not, no, 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 no. But if I think about my struggles through the prism of whatever virtue I might be possessed of, it's much easier to turn towards those struggles with attention, right? To work on them, to overcome them, but to also embrace them in a spirit of mercy. So I would say, trying to my sister, trying to find that balance, to hold yourself accountable, is number one about kind of embracing the favor that you have been shown by God, embracing the good that exists, you know, um, in you, embracing the virtue that you express very beautifully. And then through the prism of those virtues, looking at the challenges, looking at the struggles, looking at the weaknesses, looking at the flaws, because then you see that, okay, I can hold myself accountable for these weaknesses without that leading to the conclusion that I'm worthless, or that I'm nothing, or that I've never done anything wrong. I've never done anything right, right? That always helps me.
Mahir Khan asked, "How to prevent fantasizing about something that quote quote unquote could have been, even when you understand that it was never meant for you?" Question mark.
Mm. The Prophet والسلام, in an authentic hadith, said that low, the word low in Arabic, which means, I would translate it as if only, right? It opens a door for the shaitan, right? It opens the door to adm rida bi qadrillah. It opens the door to being displeased or discontent with the decree of God, right? So, don't take that kind of ideation lightly. Of course, uh, regret, remorse, these are normal human emotions, normal, human feelings. But when you experience them, when that voice comes to you and says, if only things would have worked out differently, you have to speak back to that voice, saying what? قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. No, what Allah decreed is what happened. What Allah decreed, literally what Allah measured is what He did. قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. Right? Allah measured what He wanted, and that is what He did. Right? Right? Allah decreed what He wanted, and that is exactly what He did. Right? So I would say to my brother, the way that I deal with that, of course, you have those thoughts, you have those ideas, why did I do this? If only I would have done this. Oh, if just say, MashaAllah, 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 right? It's actually okay to engage yourself in that kind of internal dialogue, right? Right? Something suggests to you, if only, and you say what? MashaAllah. No, if you, MashaAllah, MashaAllah. And you want to do that until that voice is quieted. MashaAllah, MashaAllah,
And how would you translate,
MashaAllah.
mashallah? See, how would you translate, mashallah?
MashaAllah is it's what Allah wanted, right? It 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 it's it was the will of God. MashaAllah, it was the will of God. It was the will of God. It was the will of God.
On the topic of thinking about others' faults, how do we discuss the broader issues in the community if it's for constructive reasons? Is that still wrong?
Um, well, thinking about others' faults, and thinking about issues in the community are not exactly the same thing. One can be depersonalized. If I'm just thinking about religious literacy in the Muslim community, I'm not thinking about such and such Muslim that doesn't know anything about Islam. Right? They're not exactly the same thing. So if one wants to tackle certain issues in the community, and you're just thinking about them in abstract terms, but in order to think about the issue, in order to posit some suggestions about how the issue could be dealt with, you have to think about it in depth. You have to think about, if we think about, the issue of estrangement from the masjid. Why are people estranged from the masjid, right? We have to actually get into the weeds of that discussion. We have to really go into, what is it about the current devotional and programmatic offerings at the masjid that alienates certain people, right? That's not the same thing as thinking about some weak, uncommitted Muslim that doesn't go to the masjid. Do you understand what I'm saying? One is depersonalized, and we're thinking about an issue that we want to tackle at a community level. And the other is thinking about this person and their weakness, this person and their struggle. To me, at least, there's a clear difference between the two.
No, see. So I'm going to take two more questions, and I think we're going to call it. Are you okay with that?
Bismillah, of course, huh?
Okay, so should we limit our fantasizing about Jannah since it's technically beyond our comprehension?
No.
Yeah.
No, mashallah. It's it's an interesting question, believe it or not. I think me just saying no, that was my, enfeebled attempt to be witty. But it's actually a very good question. And it was, definitely asked by somebody who's thinking very deeply about what we read this evening. Um, you know, I don't even, fantasizing about Jannah. If that fantasization, to use your word, Ali, right? If that fantasizing increases our longing for Jannah, and that longing increases our propensity to work to attain God's paradise, to attain the kingdom of God, then clearly this fantasizing about Jannah is benefiting us, right? If we think about its delights and we think about closeness to the Prophet والسلام, and the righteous and all of the men and women that have uh, dedicated their lives to God and have earned his pleasure and good favor. If we think about, you know, um, I've been advised against using the term beatific vision, right? Beatific vision is the vision of God, but that's a Christian concept that has its own kind of theological trappings. But if one thinks about whatever is intended in that hadith about us being able to experience God in a way that we cannot experience God in the life of this world, if all of that fantasizing and all of that thinking and and reflecting and contemplating is leading to longing that urges one to work for paradise, then it's a good thing. On the other hand, if that fantasizing leads one to the conclusion that it really is unattainable, it's just a pie in the sky, right? And we have to be very careful that, different people, um, some of them religious thinkers, a few come to mind, many more of them socialist thinkers. This is one of the reasons that they disparaged religion or religion that espouses belief in the afterlife, in the hereafter, right? It's just a pie in the sky. It's just, this panacea, this cure-all for, the oppression and tragicomic reality of life in this dunya. It's just, it's just something for people who cannot deal with the absurdity of life. And if you're fantasizing about heaven leads you to disbelief in heaven, leads you to the conclusion that, yeah, you know what? It is too good to be true. It is just, a fantasy. Uh, then it's not that one is thinking about heaven too much. One is not thinking about heaven in the correct way. One is not thinking about heaven in the correct way, right? So very, very good question, actually. So much for my attempt at a witticism, you know.
Um, so last question, inshallah. We might have answered this a little bit, but the second part of the question is something we haven't delved into. But do you know how to fight this kind of excessive thought? Question mark. The second part of the question says, any du'as to do or to recite for this?
I think the way that one combats um, excessive fantasizing is through presence, right? Is to recognize all of the grandeur, all of the wonder, um, all of the miraculousness of the actual reality in which you find yourself. You know, um, presence presence presents us with, like we are sitting in the midst of so much blessing and rahmah and mercy, and just breathtaking miracle. And I use that term in conscience. I use that term in conscience. That fantasizing about something that isn't our business, something in which we're not engaged, something that might be unattainable. The real mistake we're making is that we're forgetting what's in front of us, right? The person that is fantasizing about something they'll never have, perhaps, is forgetting the blessing of what they actually do have and how amazing it is to be favored by God with what they actually have, right? The person thinking about some person that the chances are they may never meet, is actually overlooking all of the fabulous and and amazing people that they actually know. And if they wanted to express romantic interest in one of those people, maybe they would be successful, right? So I would say that excessive fantasizing is countered through presence, just trying to be more present centered, trying to really take account of the uh, amazing nature. It's such a lackluster word for what I'm feeling. Um, of what one is actually experiencing, man. Um, you know, During the Tetlif Mu'allif mentorship program, of course, those retreats were held at a place called Green Gulch, which was a Zen Buddhist meditation center. And one of the things that we would do is we would engage in some of the um, traditions of the community there. And one thing they did was they spent the first 15 minutes of every meal in complete silence. And although I can't lie and say that I've maintained this uh, practice, I do remember actually feeling a deeper appreciation for the food, just being present with it. And I remember feeling the textures of the food differently. Um, you know, Experiencing all the different notes of flavor of the food that if I was just talking away, I probably wouldn't have experienced. And that encounter with that practice, it just opened me to how much more of my experience would be enriched if I really, really like invested in those experiences with everything that I could, with focus, with istihdar, with presence, with an attentive mind and an attentive heart. So I think that fantasizing is probably best countered through presence.
Yeah, it's amazing you say that because two things. When I was at that same, by the way, that place is something else.
Certainly.
That place is something else, but that's for another conversation. But what I'll say is, uh, one of the things that I learned over there was like take a bite of food with a spoon, and then just put the spoon down on the table
Yeah.
and finish your bite, and then pick up the spoon again, take another
Right.
bite. That just alone changed my perspective. And the Prophet ﷺ used to chew his food, to my knowledge, to correct me if I'm wrong, is at least 25 times each bite.
which is I've never heard that specific number, but a lot of us, man, we don't even chew and what's called masticate the
No,
food that we eat well. We just, maybe gnash it,
sometimes like a
gnash it
dog,
with
I'm just like a
gnash it with our teeth one or two times, you know, and then we wonder why we have indigestion. You know what I'm saying? It's like, food. I mean, of course, um, the stomach will break down food, but food actually, needs to be, chewed well, needs to be broken down well before it's introduced to the stomach.
yeah.
So
And
more
usually,
presence.
yeah, it usually tastes better too when you break it down that way. Honestly, try.
Mashallah, more presence, man, and just more presence, more gratitude. Reflecting on what we really do have, um, and what we've been blessed with, as opposed to just fantasizing about what we can only fantasize about.
Yeah, and with that, Alhamdulillah, we are grateful with Sidi Ubaydullah Evans, and we're grateful to be able to sit here and to learn this book, Purification of the Heart. We are doing this all year long, everyone, all year long. Whether it's virtual, I pray to God it doesn't stay that way all year long.
I swear, man. Man, I'm not telegenic, and it feels kind of Rod Serling Twilight Zone esque to just talk into my phone inside of a circle, a lighted circle. I just feel like I'm in a sci-fi movie or something like that, man. So we got to get everybody stay home, flatten the curve, so we can get back into the space, and back to a place where we're benefiting from each other, and and enjoying each other's company, inshallah.
Yeah, because Sidi Ubaid only has this face to look at the whole time. That's rough. But we're grateful for all of you who attend. We're grateful that you all are with us on this pulse. Alhamdulillah, we haven't missed a pulse yet. Really appreciate it. Um, you guys are more than welcome to engage with Ta'leef website. Learn more about 1,000 Hearts of Ta'leef. That's a campaign that we're doing in which we get 1,000 people to give $3 a day to support Ta'leef in any way, shape, or form. Please find out more about that on our website. At the same time, I just want to let you guys know that we do have programs throughout the whole week. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we have Being Muslim with Will Caldwell. Thursday, we have the Burda. Sunday, we have a beautiful check-in with the community, and sometimes we have the likes of Imam Zaid. Sheikh Mohammed Mendez was on there last week, and that was a beautiful gathering. And we had Sheikh Muslima Prime, Permal, and a few others. Sheikh Aisha Prime is going to be coming through as well. You guys should hit that up. Let us know if you need anything at all. And I do see your question, Sana, about meditation. If the admin can kind of guide her on that, she wants to know a little bit more about meditation, what recommendations that we have for that. Ta'leef has had some history in that. So inshallah, we can give you some answers. If the admin can engage with her on that, that would be lovely. Jazakallah khair. Thank you all for making this happen.
Alhamdulillah.
Bimanallah, I'm gonna go get some dinner. Wassalamu alaikum wa
Wa
rahmatullahi.
alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.